Put your phone down. On today's WAC Attack episode, Alan and I are talking about what it's like going into business with a family member and a close friend. We talk about a lot of things we think are important. We cover off on traits and characteristics of the person, what it takes to start up a corporate business and the operations agreements that you should think about and what you should put in place. Then we talk about a bunch of our experiences over the last 15 years, and we give you guys just a lot of insight in what we've come across in our business and how you can use it to start up a business with your family member or friend. Stay tuned.
I'm Alan, coming out of my shell today. Welcome to the WAC Attack podcast, where I'm going to talk about being in business with my twin brother, what it's like to start a business with your family member. Also, Wally will be on here at some point. We'll talk about, starting it with a friend, right?
Yep.
And
I'm Curtis, Morty, and I never had a shell. Let's go.
And if we're busting out of your ears right now and you're turning us down, well, we're going to stay this tone, so keep it right about there. A little bit about us and our background. We've done, 3 businesses together.
Yes.
I think life's a little bit different and interesting for us. We're twins.
It has. And I'll say
Right.
3 businesses, but we've learned to make money together since the day we were born. So the first way we learned to make money was we're rolling around our flyer wagon, collecting people's newspapers and recycling newspapers. Then it was cans.
Yep.
And then it was collecting Christmas trees for $5.
We used to drive around with our dad, and both of us be in the back of the truck, and you slap on the truck. You see a Christmas tree, somebody's on the side of the house, walk up, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, ring the doorbell.
If it was a lady, hi, we're picking up Christmas trees for $10. If it was a guy, hi, we're picking up Christmas trees for $5 because the cute factor went down when the dude answers the door.
Yeah, exactly.
When the lady answers the door, that cute factor, you just shine it on up.
Yeah, you
right?
do. Yeah, and you're 8, 9, 10 years old, and our dad had a truck with a rack on it, so we could really stack the trees in there. And I think one time we had an enclosed trailer, so we were able to get a lot.
So we used to hustle people for a couple $100 a pop,
and our
dad would hustle us.
Yeah.
So you got my time and gas and insurance.
Yeah.
So he taught us a lot about
he taught us
business.
how to run a business. It costs money to make money, which is for
100%.
reals. And then, working for other people, we've always worked together at the various jobs we've had. We worked at Sonic together. We worked at a restaurant together. Then we started the business together.
Worked at Sunrise Natural Foods, but not together.
Yeah, I've worked
Just
there.
different
I worked there
locations.
for 3 weeks. It was silly. And then we worked with our father, who's a general contractor. So we basically worked in the trades while we were teenagers.
So I guess you could say we're experts in working with family members in business because our dad had us on the job. We've been hustling, you, I, and our older brother, Mike, and then you and I have had a bunch of businesses together. But, even before we started our business, we also used to just push the lawnmower around the neighborhood, and people who had the long...
That was another thing.
Long weeds. And we're like, hey, we'll mow your lawn for $20, right?
Whatever it was.
And so we were always constantly hustling and, trying to make a buck. And that interlaced into Morte. So why don't you tell me about that?
It is. Quick shout out to Alan. We played paintball, traveled around the United States playing. Alan got into it. He was the last of the brothers to get into it. And this guy traded a basic gun up to 3 really advanced guns. I'll never forget. He did the swaps with people. I'm like, hey, that was a pretty entrepreneurial move of you there, hustling people. You're like, you ended up $800 ahead in 3 or 4
making
trades.
deals. I like making deals.
Yeah, so we'll kind of fast forward here into our first business, which was a Linux hosting based business. Wally and I started that. We were young in high school. And that kind of was a secondary stem out of Wally's first successful business venture that wasn't with us. And then that
was basically just middlemanning hosting before cloud computing.
Essentially.
That's
and just
basically all it was.
Some of Wally's parents and his contacts and things like that needed websites, and Wally was building sites, and we'd known Wally for
We basically built websites and web hosting in the world of Drupal. WordPress was just coming around. It's 2005, 2006, 2007, sometime right around in there. And, what I can say, though, is where we got really lucky about working and being, and starting a business with family member and friends.
Yeah.
We had youth and the luxury of time on our side.
100%. And no responsibilities.
And 0 responsibilities. So it was a lot of fun. And so we were just hanging out with our friends. Obviously, you were my best friend, hanging out with Wally. And we were just figuring out ways to make money. Especially, we called it, the internet hustle. We weren't hustling people for money, but we were hustling to try to figure out how we could make a business with the internet.
Yeah, and our Friday nights were watching YouTube videos and doing things. And I remember that I learned, when I was learning how to program, I learned how to do an authentication login area.
Yep.
PHP, and I stayed up all night
building
something.
So we did a lot of these things. But I would say, we've now been in the business. You, Wally, and I have been in a business together for
almost 13
16 years.
Almost 13 years actually. If you talk about us being incorporated, about 13 years.
Yeah.
Working together over 15.
Yeah. Coming up on that 15th complete year, going on 16.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so a lot of lessons that we've learned over the years. I think it's very good to say this. The lines between business and the lines between pleasure or personal time, they become blurred.
In our case, non-existent.
Yeah. And is that challenging? Yes. Can you attempt to set boundaries? 100%. Yes, you can. But the reality is there's really no boundaries that are going to define every situation. And if you're, considering going in business with a family member or a friend, that's the first thing you got to basically ask yourself is, am I okay with either my personal relationship with this person or my business relationship with this person either dwindling or going away, or one overtaking the other, right?
And also consider what happens if the business fails. Does your friendship and your relationship also fail at the same point in time? These are the things that a lot of people, I'm not saying they should consider them, but these are possible risks when you go into business with a family member or a close friend.
But on the flip side with that,
it's wild if you have great success.
And it's also super motivating to make sure you don't fail, because it's not only are you letting yourself and your people, whomever around you
your tribe,
are down, but if you're going into business with a family member or you're going to business with a friend and you're not trying to fuck somebody, in relation to being a bad business partner, it's extra motivating to not also let them down.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that tribe that you have to take care of is bigger, and so that responsibility weighs a little bit heavier. So you take things a lot more seriously. So I think that although there's a con there's definitely a little bit of a pro in terms of the motivation.
There is a pro. You got to make sure that the people that you're going into business with, right, they also have that same motivation. The like-mindedness, not in terms of you and personalities, but the like-mindedness in terms of direction and approach and, desire to hey, at the end of the day, it comes down to revenue. What are we doing to make revenue and things of the sort? I think that you said something very important, which was, hey, the lines are going to get blurred. A lot of times the lines get blurred because of opportunities that you have to make money or opportunities that you have to make revenue. And a lot of times those come from new arenas that you might not have thought you could have made money in, services or products that you need to offer,
or a new relationship comes over and
relationship.
It's a hot opportunity, but you're at a barbecue with the family on the weekend.
Exactly.
So instead of talking about drinking beer and beer pong or whatever else what the kids are doing, you're sitting there hypothesizing, how are we going to close this deal on Tuesday?
Exactly. And that's really what it turns out to be is even when you're hanging out with that person in good faith to do something fun, work comes up. And especially if your passion is also your job and your business, that's what's going to be on your mind. You're going to be thinking about these things. Hopefully you're sleeping well. But when you wake up, if you're like a lot of other entrepreneurs, your mind is turning on what is the next thing I need to do? What are the steps I need to make? Where do I need to make adjustments in what we're doing?
And this is another thing I really want to bring up here. When you go into business with a family member or friend, we're not talking nepotism. We're talking calculated decisions, because it's not all bad. I mean, we've been doing this for, like I said, in the next couple of years, we're going to be approaching 2 decades, right? And, that speaks volumes for itself. I think there's a lot of folks out there that can talk I've been in business with a family member, best friend. And you're like, oh, well, how long have you been in business? Oh, a year or 2, 2 years, 3 years,
Or how much money do you make?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I make enough money to get by.
Yeah, 30, 40 grand. It's no, fuck off.
Yeah.
Right.
Scale. Can you scale a business?
Yes.
Can you talk 7 figures and then go from 7 figures to 8 figures?
Exactly. And we've passed that mark, and now we're doing this for, we've been doing this for almost two, on our second decade.
We're in the middle part of the second decade.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so my point here is, when you are considering this is not just your friends and family or whatever else. This is saying, can you do it? Yes. So what should you consider if you are making the decision or you're leaning towards yes? The first thing I look at is discipline. You are obviously one of the most disciplined people I knew. Why is discipline important in my mind? Discipline's important because you're really looking for consistency day in and day out, because if the lines are blurred between work and between your personal life, you need to have a level of consistency with whomever the person is, whether it's friend or family that you're running the business with, because there's comfort and structure and consistency, and to be consistent
no.
is discipline, because you
Comfort,
know what you're.
comfort and structure. I would say there's structure, but I wouldn't agree that there's comfort.
Okay, I like knowing
Comfort aligns with lack of discipline, in my opinion, in
Okay.
my viewpoint in life.
See, I maybe it's confidence is the word that I'm going for. Here for me, it gives me a lot of confidence in knowing that there is the consistency due to the discipline, and that is what makes it really important in my mind. The other thing that I feel like is incredibly important outside of discipline is domain expertise. You do not want to go into business with somebody who has the same skills you do, because you will argue, bicker,
nonstop,
fight, etc. Right? Because especially if you both have that drive.
There could be some obvious exceptions to this rule. Like, for example, let's say you have like a landscape company or a tile company, and you run a crew and your brother runs a crew, and you guys are like, that's the business together. Sure, you know what? Like, that might work. But in a lot of other cases, don't have the same skill
If
sets.
you are boboth working together the same day and you have, or
you're in the same
on a daily
place,
basis,
doing the same
place,
thing.
exactly.
Unless. So let's throw. I don't want to throw like absolutes here and bounds of like what can and can't be.
No, we're throwing high probability situations. If you both have the same skill sets, you should be taking a huge look at that and going, is this going to be a problem in the future? Because guess what you also have to be looking at? What are the things you're bad at?
Yeah. I think that in talking about having the same skill sets, you mentioned, hey, discipline. That's what I was going to start with. I think the next thing, and this is in no particular order, humility. Humility goes a long way. So, for example, if you have two people that are really good at the same thing, if they both have an expert level of humility where they can recognize when they're wrong and acknowledge when they're wrong and do something differently, I think that two really smart people with the same skill sets can actually become better, right? Because they are able to ebb and flow and work with each other. Where I think something like that falls apart is if your biases are the same. If your biases are the same, then you're both inherently biased. Like for example, in the world of software engineering, this is why being a one-man band when it comes to developing software, it's a good thing because you can move really quickly. It's a bad thing because your whole code base is riddled with your own biases. Like, you have nobody else's thoughts and opinions going into this thing. So I think that if you have humility, that you can go ahead and you could actually work better. That might be the edge use case where, hey, things do work. But if you have a lot of biases, that would be an other variable to consider, where if you are both in alignment with your biases, then you may miss something.
That's a great point. I could not agree with that more. And when you look at the biases and the skill sets and everything else, I think about it as, what's your working relationship going to be? We just discussed the dimensions of your working relationship, and what I think we've done a really good job of, especially working together. You have the things that you do, and when stuff comes up, I go, all right, so what's the call? And there's things that I do that are in the same circumstance, and there's also areas of the business that Wally's in which are the same circumstance. That is what keeps the business functioning, is we each have our areas of domain and expertise, and that's where we get to contribute our individual skill sets, our individual leadership, our individual confidence into those. Mm-hmm. And then, collectively as a group, we get to decide on some, bigger picture strategic things. And I think that has been part of the reasons why we've been really wildly successful with this so far. It has not come without challenges, though.
Yeah, to add to that, I think we did the one thing that you have to do right, which is you have to have the domain expertise, and you have to know when to not answer all the questions or just delegate when you're talking to somebody and say, hey, we have this person. Or like if somebody wanted to talk to me about something that you're knowledgeable about, I should know what it is, but I shouldn't necessarily know how it's done. I should be able to talk to them about what it is, and then boom, insert Alan here and let you come in and back cleanup. We did that really well with you, me, and Wally with the love triangle we have with domain expertise and skill sets and running the business and things of the sort. I think there was a lot of other things that we had to really learn the hard way on, that we just, by always having a all for one and one for all mentality, we've all taken a turn in the box where we've been wrong. We've all taken a turn where we've messed up. We've all taken a turn where we've shined, and we've all just absolutely knocked some things out of the park. And going through those repetitions of successes and failures, we've identified that I think the next big thing is communication. do you know how to communicate with each other? And do you know how to read each other? So that a level of emotional intelligence along with the ability to communicate is really important. If you can't articulate your ideas to the people you are in business with, or you can't have a tough conversation with the people you're in business with and you get away from being objective where it turns into an attack or things of the sort, that's going to be very much to your detriment. You also need to have the emotional intelligence to understand when is the right time to deliver a message and just be reading people. People have bad days. Something goes on at home. They might be frustrated about some issue with the client or some
Or they got a busy fucking day.
Or they're tired, right? There's all of these things come up. And so while lack of progress, right, will kill a lot of things. And you always, as a business owner, you always want to be progressing. But sometimes you have to know that, like, I've done enough for today and it's time to pack it in for the day and I need to prepare for tomorrow. And I'm not saying, just kick the can further on down the road. I'm saying strategically pick your battles and your communications in productive argumentation. Pick those things to do at the right time.
I think that's a great point. I think that is absolutely a key consideration as well. I think the piece that you touched on there that I'd like to dive more into is the, not only the being, what is the word? Having the humility, right? But also I believe that the person who's on the receiving end of it should have thick skin. If whoever you're considering getting in business with is sensitive to a degree, and sensitive is not a very important part of...
I wish I had a soundboard so I'd be like, stop, pump the brakes.
Of the job role.
Yeah.
Or camera 2 went out. Oh, shit. Hit pause. So, I mean, I think that's a really great point that you have there with the humility piece. But I also feel like when you're in business with a family member or a friend, you have to make sure that they have a thick skin. I think that is very important.
As you're telling me about your feelings right
now.
I mean, I'm kidding.
But I think that's really important because inevitably you are going to be in crunch time, a busy situation, etc.
Yes.
And, things aren't going to go down perfectly. And there's not going to be a counselor session at the end of it to figure it all the time, because you're going to be in a crunch time, whether you got a production you got to hit or whether you got service delivery or whatever. So the ability to sort of just, brush stuff off and shake stuff off, I think is really important because, like you said earlier, sometimes people just have bad days, and there's a host of reasons why somebody could be having a bad day. Yeah. And you know what? It could just be like, hey, they're stressed out at work and they said something that they didn't need to say. And you know what? Just because we did that doesn't mean they don't like me, or doesn't mean that we're not, family members who love and respect each other. It just means that person has a bad day. And so, if there is a shared level of sort of being thick-skinned, these are some of the things that I think are actually really good about family members and working with them. Because if you have a good rapport with family members, usually you'll have a little bit of a thicker skin and stuff doesn't tend to bug you as much. And I have to say, like, while it will be challenging to work together because the lines are blurred, that this is also another one of the pros that's, really great about it. Because you and I have been working with each other for, so long now, almost 2 decades that we have actually been working together, and we're only 32, right? And
no, wrong.
Yeah,
wrong.
Almost 32.
No, you just said right. I just said wrong.
Okay, left. But my point here to that was, sometimes you're like, hey, Alan, dude, you got to fix some stuff, or you got to correct that. Or, I say that, and I'm like, okay, cool. I know, like, this isn't coming from a bad place. This is just us talking business. He's right. Like, we need to go do this.
It wasn't weaponized. It was purely just like a, hey, constructive criticism.
Exactly. And I think those are really important pieces.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. I think that to add to that, if somebody says something to you that you don't like, or your family member or somebody you're in business with, don't worry about that you don't like it. Maybe ask them, hey, what are you actually trying to say? Because a lot of times people are delivering a message, and the first time they deliver the message, they fail to deliver the message they're trying to say. We've all done it. I've been there. You've been there. Wally's been there. A lot people that are listening, I feel like everybody's been here. There's been a time where, listen, we all can't be perfectly calculated every time we tell somebody something. We could strive to be that way, but we're going to make a mistake at some point in life. To err is to be human, right? It's going to happen to you at some point in time. So when somebody says something like that to you, if you can recognize it, like, hey, that thing presses my buttons, instead of allowing it to press your buttons, you just say, hey, I understand that you just told me something. I don't quite think I interpreted it correctly. Can you just tell me what you want or what you're trying to do in different words? Or maybe if you recognize that they're kind of attacking you a little bit because they're having a bad day or something of the sort, you can just say, hey, you know what? Let's give this another try.
But this is also where it's really fun being family and friends, because you can go, hey, Curtis, you're a fucking asshole. You can't say that to employees
Alan,
these days.
stop being a bull in a china shop and just picking up shit and starting to run with it. It's like, dude, those are knives. Put them down and stop.
There is some benefit to that, right? And if you have some of those features and those traits, I think it works really well.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's impossible to run a business with family. The friends can get challenging, but the family I would lean towards if you were wanting to get into a preference with that.
Level of trust too. I think the trust is really
that's
important.
why I said the friend thing, because it takes a longer period of time to establish a level of trust that you need with a friend than with a family member, right? Because usually it's sort of implicit. It's been there for a long time.
So yeah,
let's
talk about
the water.
Let's talk about the trust. So we've known Wally since we're 4. Wally's basically like my brother from another mother. When you're in a business with somebody, it's a very intimate relationship. 100%. I know how much that person's getting paid. I know how much they make. I know their finances, because when you go get loans and things of the sort, guess what you have to have? I'm going to end up seeing their bank accounts. Like, all of your dirty laundry.
It gets aired.
It gets aired.
It gets aired.
Whether you like it or not, at some point. And like, if you run a smaller business and you're not getting loans and things, that's fine. If you're trying to scale a business, all of this stuff's going to come out.
Yep.
All of
without
it.
any doubt.
I mean,
and you know what else is going to become really interesting? And I don't think I think a lot of folks either don't know this or they discount it. But all your relationships get intertwined.
All of them.
All of them get intertwined.
Your wife's relationships and your relationships, like you inadvertently date the other person's wife because you work together.
Yep. And now you're semi-responsible for not only making sure that they have good, solid well-being, but now you're also a person that, they can come to, like, hey, he's having some issues or she's having some issues, right? And so now you're in that inner circle because, right, all that, I won't say dirty laundry, but, the kimono has been opened, right? So now everybody's aware. So now you're in that trusted circle. So now their circle is bigger. So now you're part of their resource group that they go to. And so if you have that success in running a business together, that's also something that, you
have to consider.
You have to consider. And that was also the realest struggle for my wife, when she was like, wait, I'm dating you, but, they come along. Right?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I love your wife. She's great.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time to get through. Like, hey, I'm a package deal. Not in a relationship way, but in a way of like, my life is basically their life. So
it got stamped in your brain in like 5th grade when you got played for kickball. You're like, Curtis and I are a package deal. No, it's a really good point. On the other side of that is like, hey, you mentioned you're going to open the kimono and everything's going to be out there for the people you're in business with to see. It's also equally the case. Like, hey, if you get in business with your brother or your best friend or something, what happens if their household implodes? If they go through a nasty divorce or something happens or God forbid they lose a child or things of the sort, you have to be prepared for those situations, because that's a lot of times where you see a lot of people like sever businesses, or one person buys the other out, or like, you don't want a spouse. Like, if you have a corporation, I'm not giving you legal advice or any structure or thing like that, but something to think about is like, what happens if they don't have a prenup and somebody goes through a divorce and now the assets are split? And
correct. And so this is something to consider. So you might be getting in business. If you're getting in business together
with your brother's ex-wife
that's weird. That never happened to us. So just want to put that out there. But if you're getting into business before you're married, absolutely, right? The premarital agreement should be a thing, and you can specify just the assets, that you'd like to protect.
Buy-sell agreements.
And again, not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just my personal opinion and
Let's
my
just
experience.
make it a trifecta. It's not financial advice.
Yeah. But on the flip side, if you're already married and you go into business, because there's a lot of folks out there who do that, what you can do is in your operating agreement, right? And so make sure in your operating agreement, if you go start a company from LegalZoom, you're not going to get this stuff, okay? You have to consult a lawyer, you have to consult the internet, and you have to look up operating agreements. And when you look up operating agreements, what I think is really, really, really important is you really need to make sure that you have specificity in there to the buy-sell portions, or so you can have a buy-sell agreement, and that pretty much specifies that in the case of death, disability, divorce, etc., dissolution, right, the 4Ds. In the case of divorce,
not 4D, the 4Ds.
If you have to split the stock between a shareholder and a party who was their previous spouse, the company has the right to buy that first. So that company buys it from the person who owns the stock originally, and then the person who owns the stock originally pays out the spouse. So what happens is then you never introduce somebody that you were never intending to go into business with. And that is so incredibly important to touch on here when you are considering going into business with your family and friends. And I think we're sort of transitioning into the the second half of the show.
Rewind a second here. So for people that are just wanting to start a business, they're wanting to make money.
Correct.
Chances are they're not going to think about any of that stuff. They might not have funds to do those things. I'm not going to give people advice on how to do this, but you should always have this in the back of your mind, and you should have this conversation with the person you're going into business with, family member, or
before you even go into business.
Before you even go into business, and you may also have to consider if they're already married, like what's their marriage like. You might have to calculate some things beyond just the person.
And that's where I said the lines between
it's blurred.
Business and work become incredibly blurred.
Let me come back to my point here. So you might not have the wherewithal, whether that be the financial backing when you start your company, or the revenue, or the things of the sort. But as you grow your company, there needs to be a point where that becomes considered, right? Maybe put it in your line item one year and have a budget for it where you're accounting for those funds, where eventually at the end, by the time you have a pile of money or something of the sort, you can achieve those things. That is very important to protect your business. And, most businesses fail within the first 3 years. So maybe don't do those things right out of the gate.
Wait, no, I disagree 100% with you.
So no, just hold on a second. What I'm saying is, depending on where your business is starting from, that's a very big difference in place. If you have money to invest to start up your business, you may want to do these things straight out of the gate. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you can't do that. What I am saying is
you should have the conversation about these things, and then you should also put it in writing, because I would recommend.
Yeah,
because hold on. Let me just say this. We have never done anything to screw the other person.
No.
Period. There's no debate about that. And what you and Wally and I went through when we actually got an attorney that was one of the best there is, period. I don't mean to go all Trump on it, but it's the greatest. He's the greatest. Okay.
Of all time, if not ever.
Yeah. You can see my hand movement if you're on YouTube. But my point is,
he's great. He's a great guy. I love him. Snoop D-O-double-G. I love him. I mean, my attorney. I love him.
Yeah. So John, our attorney, pretty much sat the three of us down and said, like,
Stormy Daniels, it wasn't me.
He pretty much said, hey, this is basically a hot effing mess.
Yeah, it was.
And what we learned through going with him all and like getting our corporate books cleaned up and taking care of everything, because we had some initiatives we needed to do, and that needed to be actually in the legalese of our corporate books and everything else. That's how this all came to purview. The thing is the operating agreement and the buy-sell agreement are so important.
Yes.
Because the operating agreement and the buy-sell agreement basically specify how you're going to run the company. It specifies how you're going to run the finances. It specifies how you're going to handle all of the legal things of operating the company. It specifies how you're going to deal with ownership of the company and, how you were to ever, buy in or buy out. These are the things, and this is why I totally disagree with you. These are the things that you need to have done and discussed up front. So first thing is, before you invest any time, energy, and effort in figuring out the buy-sell agreement or the operating agreement, it's what we talked about earlier. It's, sort of the traits of what a good partner looks like, who's a family member or a friend. And then once you've gotten to that point, you said, I think this could work. I think this could go somewhere. Then you need to start sitting down and you need to go over the legal aspect of it. Because like I said, if you just go to LegalZoom, LegalZoom, we'd love to have you as a sponsor. But if you just go to LegalZoom,
But your stuff's not.
they're not going to get
It's
you.
not drawn out to the way it
Yeah.
needs to be drawn out to protect people. It's,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have to go and you have to either do your homework or you have to go consult a professional and get it in your operating, get in your buy-sell agreement, because a lot of the things that a prenuptial agreement does to protect a business, a buy-sell agreement can also do, and an operating agreement can also do.
perfect. I think that's a great segue. What I was saying is like, look, if you're young and you're starting a business with your friend or your family member and you don't have a ton of money, I think the first thing, like, know that you need to do these things and have it in the back of your head. You should have a backlog of what you need to do to make your business more professional, to make a better posture for your business, and to scale your business 100%. So what I'm saying for them is like, know that you need to do this thing and maybe have discussions about these things and get everybody on the same page. But if you don't have the funds to do it, I said businesses fail in the first 3 years because maybe you have to prove that you can make revenue and like you could actually have a business and things. So hold on. If you're going into a business where you have some money that you're funding the business with, of course you should do this, right? This is just, it's a cost of starting a business. You should 100% go that way. I was just trying to say, hey, there's a couple different arenas where people might be starting businesses from, and you can't just blanket say, hey, you have to do this. What I'm saying is be aware of this and know when it's time to do it and when it's time to have a discussion about it, but know that you have to do it in the future. That's all I'm saying.
Right. So we talked about probably the most important aspect from a legal perspective. We talked about traits of what would make a good partner who's a family member or a friend. Now let's actually talk about some of the business operations, things you should be considering, at least from our experience, on operating a business with a family member or a friend. I personally believe...
Did we cover all the traits that we think are best about...
I think we nailed them, most of them down. Thick-skinned, level of humility, trustworthiness, skill sets not in the same domain, discipline, consistency. I would say we nailed on the core ones. So now if we go to the operating side of the business, let's say you've gotten in, you've nailed down the buy-sell agreement, the operating agreement, all this stuff. You've picked the right family member or friend to go into business with. Having clear roles and responsibilities for who is doing what on a daily basis is incredibly important. Also, having clear responsibilities for who is doing what to operate the company on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis is also incredibly important. These, in my mind, are like the foundations of what you would need to be successful running a family business or a business with a friend. And because the reason why is now that you've got everything situated, all the check boxes for setting yourself as best ahead as possible, picking the right person, all the check boxes, making sure that, hey, there is a written and agreed to way in writing of how the company is going to operate. Then the next thing is there is a documented and agreed upon roles and responsibilities for who's going to be doing what in the organization, because that removes a lot of the confusion that I think comes, and it's real easy.
Like what do I do? What does Alan do? It's a really good point, especially when you start bringing in employees. That's an exercise that you should go through, because when people are coming on board, they know what their job is, they know what their job isn't, where their roles and responsibilities are.
And remember the whole thing about being thick-skinned and like how I said, F you, Curtis. That's one of the benefits of being a family member. One of the cons of being a family member is it is too easy to pull the FU card because somebody calls you out on not doing your responsibilities or what they thought you should be doing.
And you don't like it.
And then you don't like it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, like going basically like full blown, sixth grader.
That's where the humility comes into play.
And that's where the roles and responsibilities, having those pieces together, are so important, because
it very much is, because you're going to make a mistake at some point. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. Somewhere, something is going to get dropped along the way, and you're going to get called out on it at some point or other. Know how to handle those situations, know how to accept the blame, know how to remedy the situation and move forward. The roles and responsibilities are important. I want to talk a little bit about the back end part of an operation that I think a lot of people don't really consider when they go into a business. And so we talked about, what do you need to do from like an operating agreement and a buy-sell agreement for your company? But you very briefly said something and glanced over it, but it's, hey, making sure you're having your actual corporate meetings the way you're supposed to have your corporate meetings based on your state.
If you're an LLC or a corporation.
Yeah, your corporation type and the state you live in. You need to have a documented like meeting minutes and things of the sort and schedule and stuff like that. But you also need to consider, hey, what are the things we need to be doing to run our business? There's tax that you have to consider. Like at the end of the year, there's all of your accounting. There's the maybe operational software you need to run your business, invoices, things of the sort. There's all this back-end administration.
Well, yeah, but now we're talking.
So no,
we're talking business strategy here.
Yeah, but there's a whole suite of those things that you have to do to really run your business successfully.
That's independent of any partner, whether they're family or friends.
And that's not making revenue. And so this is one of those things that you also have to consider is what happens when, like, let's hypothetically say you scale a business. Let's say you're making 7+ figures, you're on your way to 10. And let's say you and I are running a floor replacement business.
But you're out doing all the sales.
I'm out doing
running all the operations.
You're running the operations behind the scenes. I'm running the sales. I'm doing all the installs. And in my head, I'm like, dude, I'm doing all the work. What the fuck is Alan doing? And this is the thing that people need to understand. There's two parts to running a business, and you can't really only do one. You can do one, but the IRS is going to come. At the
detriment of the other.
Yeah, you can. The IRS is going to come knocking at your door, and you're going to put yourself in a bad spot. Or you could do all this work and then you try to play catch up at the end of the year. Don't do that either.
Yeah, because I it's been described to me as basically like you can scale sales, but if you don't scale delivery, whether that's service delivery or product delivery or manufacturing, whatever, you're going to run into the same problems. You're basically going to create so many headaches because you've oversold and you have no ability to deliver.
You've oversold and underdelivered. Yes.
Exactly. And so when you talk about both those roles are twins. They're pair and pair. They go hand in hand, right? So you need both of them to do very, very well with your business. And I think that that's incredibly important.
This is operational health of your business. So what's
one of the things that I think is also, it's a really key talking point. And I think that this is going to be circumstantial based off of where you're at in the business and whether you started together or whether you're bringing a family member or a friend in. But if you're starting together, like one of the things we've always done is we've always had the same pay. I'm really
glad you brought that up.
That has removed a lot of animosity, but it's also given a lot of ammo that basically says, there needs to be a fair amount of productivity if there's a fair amount of compensation.
Fair work for fair pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is important, I think, if you're just getting started off. But the other thing that you should also consider too is if you're bringing somebody in after the business has already been operating, you cannot just give a family member or a friend. You cannot overgive them. You cannot treat them differently unless they're your
Are you talking about hiring an employee?
Yes,
as hiring
a family member or hiring.
Let's stop. Let's make that our next topic. Yeah. You brought up the equal pay thing. So this is actually a really interesting area and an interesting topic that I think we should talk about since we have some experience here. There's going to be some things that are going to cross your mind or they're just going to come up because of just human nature. Okay, you're getting paid the same. And one person at one point in time might be doing more work than the other person. And it's always going to come up as like, oh, I'm doing more work or I'm the glue that holds this thing together or things of the sort. You have to have a consistent stream of communication with people who have a seat at your table where you guys are constantly talking about all the things that you're doing. And this is where the discipline, the consistency that you came in at the very beginning of the podcast, you talked about. That is really important in this arena, talking about this equal pay piece, where if we're all in this, we're getting paid the same. Because if we're consistently doing the same amount of work over time, it averages out to be equal. But if it's not, then it's lopsided. And then you have to have this conversation where you're going to create animosity like, hey, Alan, I'm doing 60% of the work and you're only doing 40% of the work, but we're getting paid the same. And you have a conversation of like, hey, your pay is not going to go down, but the next time our pay goes up, my pay is going to be the one that goes up. You just introduced a fire into your business and your warehouse is on fire right now because you have just created animosity and things of the sort. Now, it might be a little bit different if, let's say something in your business partner's life changed a little bit and you're like, hey, you know what? That like there could be scenarios where that works out, but eventually at some point, it's either going to lead to a person making an exit from the business or a person stepping up.
Yeah. If you're founders and you start a company together, And if there's going to be a fair amount of pay, there's going to need to be a fair amount of work and output, right?
Yes. So let's talk.
And hours work doesn't necessarily mean a fair amount of output. What I mean is we're going to call contribution of productivity to the organization, right? And that's really how you should measure it, because
revenue is important.
It's never going to be equal.
It should be,
but
equivalent.
It should be equivalent and balanced, right? But that's kind of contradictory because equivalent and equal, right?
No, equal is perfection. Equivalent is like these things are kind of the same.
So, that's a really important note. But now, if you're talking the side that's more nepotism, like you own a business, and you're not talking about bringing in a family member, or you're not talking about bringing in a friend as an as a partner, but you're talking about it as an employee.
There's one thing that I think adds another layer to the previous topic we were talking about, and then let's talk about the family members as employees.
No, shut up. Don't interrupt me.
Fuck.
I
waited till you transition gears, but the Peter principle. We need to talk about the Peter principle because that aligns with the potential of a person making an exit.
What is the Peter principle, Curtis?
The Peter principle is you reach your own level of incompetence. You may start a business with somebody and you may reach a certain level of success, and then as you go to scale or continue to get success, you basically just hit the edge of your capabilities. And I'm not saying that you can't grow anymore, but I'm saying this happens sometimes where people basically that's their capability level. And for whatever reason, they can't get past this invisible ceiling to continue to build themselves up as a leader of a company. That can happen if you are in business with a family member or a friend. And the Peter principle, you got to be prepared for if something like that comes up. How do you then handle a scenario like that? And how do you have that conversation with the person? It's going to be a tough conversation to have because you don't want to alienate that person from the business, but you also realize hey, if we're going in this direction and we're going from 7 figures in revenue to 10 figures in revenue, that's single millions to, tens of millions. You might need somebody to step in and take over what their role used to be and also the current state of their role because your business is growing, and that might be a threat to that person because they're basically feeling like they're getting replaced. But you might just have to find a new role for that person or things. You're going to have to come up with a solution, right? That has to be a contextually aware situation to your business, what's going on.
And I think that's sort of the challenging piece, with maturity.
Mm-hmm.
Most businesses are not going to get to that point, though.
Yeah.
That is an incredibly complicated, multifaceted issue that you have to take into account history and longevity and, goodwill and so many things that are involved in that in this situation, right? But I'd say most businesses aren't going to reach that scale. And so really what it should come down to is, there should be a fair level of and consistent level of productivity and contribution to the company. And that's just period. There shouldn't need to be a discussion or a consideration is that the right thing to do? The question should be, okay, what does, equivalent or what does, fair, what does that mean to us, right? And I think that's a good point, but that's in founder land. And the other part of this is I think when you go to hire people, I can say this, we have always aimed to hire the smartest and best people we can find. People who are smarter than us, very capable, self-starters, entrepreneurial, a lot of these things that are in there. These are the types of people that we try to hire. And the reason why that is because we know if we just hire a bunch of dum-dums to feed our ego, that's not going to help us at all. And so if you're considering hiring a family member or a friend to do a job, let me say this. One, if we remove their name from that resume, if we removed all names from resumes that you were looking at for a position,
would you pick that person?
Would you pick that person? If the answer is no, do not hire them. If you're hiring a friend out of goodwill because somebody at church asked you or your wife said, hey, I know,
or they
Susie's
just lost
son,
their job.
Yeah. Here's the deal. No. Okay. You got to start thinking like a boss. All right. That's really what it comes down to.
How does this affect my bottom line? Period.
Exactly. Now, what's really different, though, about this is if you have a role that you're high turnover and everything else in, and you need to give somebody an opportunity to start all the way at the bottom, right, and prove themselves.
There's no shame in that game.
That is the role for a family member or a friend that needs help. But what is not a role, at least in my experience, is any role in the organization which is either critical or important to the operations or the success of the company. You should be removing names, addresses, anything that you could use to personally identify somebody from a resume.
Pure
and
merit.
you should be looking at merit and skill set and qualification, and that's how you should be picking for that role.
Yeah, 100%. And I really think it's important to understand how people learn. If you can assess how somebody learns that you're hiring, that is usually a quality indicator of their ability to continue succeed and to continue to succeed at what that responsibility is, and then have the ability to then take on further responsibilities in a different role.
Because attitude and mindset is more important than skill set.
Yeah.
Skill set you can develop. Attitude and mindset, sorry.
You can't develop it.
Can't develop it.
You know, there's the adage of...
the individual can develop it. It's very hard to motivate it and get it to where you want it and within a time frame which you feel is acceptable.
Yeah, motivating people is a skill, but you want people that are self-starters. 110%. Assess how they learn. And to be honest, it's not your job as a business owner to fix people.
Okay, now lie to the audience. You said to be honest.
It's your job to unfuck people's problems.
Well, if you're a service-based business, that might be true. You did 2 truths and a lie. Go.
Alan's bald. Alan's wearing a blue shirt.
2 truths and 2 lies. Curtis follows instructions very well.
You said 2 truths. Oh, 2 truths and a lie. I was like 2 lies and a truth.
And he has the math degree, right? Okay. Well, any other topics here that you feel like are important when we're on the conversation of being in business with family and friends?
People are always going to want to give you their advice. Fuck that. You can listen to what they're saying, but you need to give yourself the time to think. You know what you need to do. Don't chase all the things you need to do all the time. Chase what's the most important and what's causing you grief at that point in time. Get those things done. Come up for air and spend a little bit of time thinking.
Because you'll find that the things you think you need to do all the time,
you don't need to do them.
There's only a few of them that you actually need to be doing.
And if you give yourself the time to think, you can come to some of these conclusions that we've talked about here on this episode, where we're telling you these things based on our experience. Well, guess what? You're going to have your own experience too, and you can come to your own conclusions, and they might be slightly different than ours. Hopefully they're not wildly different than ours. But you're going to be able to derive what you think is the way to run your business. But if you don't give yourself the time to think, all bad.
And so when you're talking about being in business with a family member or a friend, think about the traits that they have, like we discussed earlier. Think about the operations of the organization and getting that on paper. Thinking about what are the day-to-day responsibilities, monthly and quarterly and annual responsibilities. And then, like Curtis just said, also giving yourself time to think. That's a really good point to wrap this thing up and end it.
Yeah. And, if you're starting a business and you're hustling and you're doing all the work during the day and then you're doing the operational stuff at night, this is just a quick tidbit that popped in my head. Don't send your invoices out at night. I'm sorry, not your invoice. Don't send your proposals or your bids out at night.
Yeah, check them down in the morning.
Check
That's just generally good business advice for entrepreneurs that has nothing to do with family members or friends. But with that said, thank you very much for watching the WAC Attack podcast.
I'm going to interrupt Alan because he can't finish. And I think that 2 truths and a lie are 2 lies and a truth. This is the WAC Attack podcast. I'm Curtis. That's Alan. You've been WAC attacked.
Fuck off.